Welcome back to Bar Girl Baddies. Today's story comes from a 31-year-old Canadian named Marcus, who thought he'd found paradise in Pattaya. He had the condo, the nightlife, the friends, and a rotation of beautiful women who made him feel like someone he'd never been back home in Vancouver. But paradise has a price tag, and Marcus was about to learn it the hard way. He thought moving to Thailand would set him free. Instead, it trapped him in a cycle of drama, lies, and financial bleeding that nearly destroyed him. This is the story of how one man's escape became his prison, and why he had to escape all over again to finally find peace. Before we dive in, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. And if you've ever felt caught in a situation you thought would save you but ended up consuming you, hit that like button and subscribe. You're not alone. Now, here's Marcus's story in his own words. I'm writing this from a plastic chair on the porch of a small house in Isaan, about 4 hours northeast of the chaos I left behind. There's a rooster screaming somewhere in the distance, a dog lazily wandering past my gate, and the air smells like jasmine rice and burning grass. It's quiet here, so quiet it almost hurts, but I need you to understand something before I tell you why I'm here. 3 years ago, I would have laughed at this life. 3 years ago, I thought I had it all figured out. I landed in Bangkok in February of 2022 with 2 suitcases, $65,000 in savings, and a one-way ticket away from everything I'd known. I was 31, but I felt about 60. A decade on the oil rigs in Alberta will do that to you. The money was good, better than good, but the work hollowed me out. 12-hour shifts in -30 weather, sleeping in camps that smelled like diesel and sweat, surrounded by guys who measured their lives in truck payments and how much they could drink on days off. I did it because I didn't know what else to do. I did it because after my marriage fell apart when I was 27, work was the only thing that made sense. My ex-wife, Jennifer, she left me for a guy who worked in marketing and had soft hands. I'm not bitter about it anymore, or at least I tell myself I'm not. But back then, it gutted me. We'd been together since high school. I thought we'd have kids, buy a house in Langley, do the whole Canadian dream thing. When she told me she couldn't do it anymore, that I was never home, that she felt like she was married to a ghost, I didn't fight it. I just signed the papers and went back to the rigs. I threw myself into work because work didn't ask questions. Work didn't care if I was lonely. But after a while, even work couldn't fill the void. I'd scroll through Instagram at night in my camp bunk and see guys my age travelling, living abroad, smiling on beaches with women who looked like they'd stepped out of magazines. I stumbled onto YouTube videos about expat life in Thailand, guys talking about how cheap it was, how easy, how free. They'd show their condos, their motorbikes, their girlfriends who were half their age and twice as beautiful as anyone who'd look at them back home. And I thought, why the hell not? What was keeping me in Canada? Cold weather, an empty apartment, and a job that was grinding my body into dust? So I quit. I told my foreman I was done, cashed out and bought the ticket. My mom cried. My dad said I was making a mistake. My buddies thought I was having a breakdown. Maybe I was. But I didn't care. I wanted to feel something again. I wanted to be somewhere warm, where people smiled, and life didn't feel like a slow march toward nothing. I spent the first week in Bangkok, wandering around Sukhumvit, eating street food, sweating through my shirts, completely overwhelmed by the noise and the heat and the sheer aliveness of everything. But Bangkok felt too big, too impersonal. I wanted something smaller, somewhere I could actually settle in. That's when someone told me about Pattaya. They said it was a beach town, full of expats, great nightlife, cheap living. They didn't mention the rest, but I'd find out soon enough. I took a bus down, and the second I arrived, I felt like I'd found my place. Pattaya had this energy, this buzz, like anything could happen. I rented a studio near Walking Street for $300 a month. It was small but modern, air-conditioned, with a little balcony that looked out over the street. I could hear music from the bars at night, the hum of motorbikes, the laughter of people who seemed to be living without a care in the world. I'd wake up, hit the gym, grab a coffee, and spend my afternoons wandering the beach or sitting in bars watching football. At night, the city came alive. Walking Street was like nothing I'd ever experienced. Neon lights everywhere, music pounding from every doorway, girls in tight dresses standing outside clubs calling out to passing tourists. It was overwhelming at first, almost too much. But after a few nights, it started to feel normal. I met other expats, guys from the UK, Australia, the States. We'd bar hop, buy each other drinks, swap stories about where we came from and why we left. Most of us had some version of the same story. Divorce, burnout, boredom. We were all running from something. And the women. I'm not going to lie, that was a big part of it. Back in Vancouver, I was invisible. Average height, average build, thinning hair, nothing special. I'd go on dating apps and get maybe one match a month if I was lucky. But in Pattaya, I was somebody. Girls would laugh at my jokes, touch my arm, tell me I was handsome. They'd ask where I was from, what I did, if I wanted company. And yeah, I knew it was transactional. I'm not an idiot. But in the moment, it didn't feel that way. It felt like attention. It felt like mattering. I started going to the same bar, a place called Lucky Star on Soi 8. It wasn't the fanciest spot, but it had a good vibe. Pool tables, cheap Chang beer, and a rotation of girls who actually seemed fun to be around. That's where I met Noi. She was working behind the bar, 24 years old, from somewhere up north near Chiang Rai. She had this sharp wit, this way of teasing me that felt playful instead of mean. She didn't throw herself at me like some of the other girls did. She made me work for it a little, and I liked that. We started talking every time I came in. She'd pour my drinks, ask about my day, tell me stories about her village and her family. She said her mum was sick, that she was working to send money home, that she wanted to go back to school someday. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. And when she finally agreed to come home with me one night, it felt like I'd won something. That first night turned into a second, then a third. Within a month, she was staying at my place more often than not. She'd cook for me, these simple Thai dishes that tasted better than anything I could make. She'd watch movies with me, laugh at stupid comedies, fall asleep on my chest. I started paying her a monthly allowance, 15,000 baht, about 500 Canadian. She said it meant she didn't have to work as much, that she could spend more time with me. It felt like a relationship. I told myself it was a relationship. But here's the thing about Pattaya. It has this way of making you feel like you're special, like the rules don't apply to you. You see other guys getting played, getting drained, falling for the same lines, and you think, that won't be me, I'm smarter than that. I can see through the game. Except you can't. Or maybe you can, but you choose not to, because the illusion feels better than the truth. The requests started small. Noi's mom needed medicine. 2,000 baht. Her brother's motorbike broke down. 5,000 baht. Her rent was due and she was short. 3,000 baht. I gave it to her every time. I wanted to be the good guy, the generous Farang who actually cared. And she'd thank me, kiss me, tell me I was different from the other men. I wanted so badly to believe that. My expat friends started asking for help too. A guy named Dave, this 50-something Brit who'd been in Pattaya for years, hit me up for a loan to cover his bar tab. Said he'd pay me back next week. He didn't. Another guy, Australian bloke named Steve, needed money for his girlfriend's sister's hospital bill. I gave him 10,000 baht. Never saw it again. But I didn't push it. Pushing it felt cheap. Felt like I was keeping score. And in Pattaya, you're supposed to be above that. You're supposed to be the guy who flows, who doesn't sweat the small stuff. Except it wasn't small stuff anymore. I was spending $300 a week just on nights out. Drinks for the boys, bar fines for girls, tips for staff, late-night food runs, taxis, all of it adding up in ways I wasn't tracking. I'd check my bank account every few weeks and watch the number drop. 65,000 became 50. 50 became 40. I told myself I'd slow down, that I'd budget better, that this was just the adjustment period. But the truth was, I was addicted. Not to the alcohol, not even to the sex. I was addicted to feeling wanted, to walking into a bar and having people know my name, to having Noi wait for me at my condo, cooking dinner, pretending we were building something real. I was buying a fantasy, and the cost didn't matter, because the alternative, going back to being invisible, was worse. Then one night, about 8 months in, everything started to crack. I came home earlier than usual. Noi was in the shower, and her phone was on the kitchen counter. It buzzed. A line message. I wasn't planning to look, I'm not that guy. But it buzzed again, and again. And I saw the name. Darling, with a heart emoji. I picked it up. The screen lit up. There were messages from 3 different guys. One in Thai, one in broken English, one with a string of emojis that didn't need translation. She was telling someone else she missed them, someone else she loved them, Someone else was sending her money. I felt like the floor dropped out from under me. My hands were shaking. The shower was still running. I scrolled up. Days of messages. Weeks. Different guys, different conversations, same script. She was working all of us. I wasn't special. I wasn't different. I was just another name in her phone, another ATM with feelings. When she came out of the bathroom, towel wrapped around her, hair dripping, she saw me holding the phone. She didn't panic. She didn't cry. She just looked at me, sighed, and said, "You weren't supposed to see that." Like I'd violated some unspoken rule of the game. I asked her if any of it was real. She didn't answer. She just started packing her things. The clothes I'd bought her, the jewelry, the makeup. She was gone in 20 minutes, no apology, no explanation, just gone. I sat in that condo for 2 days, blinds closed, phone off, staring at the empty space where her stuff used to be. I kept replaying every moment, every smile, every time she'd said she loved me. How much of it was real? Any of it? I wanted to be angry, but mostly I just felt stupid. I'd known. Deep down, some part of me had always known. I just didn't want to admit it. But losing Noi wasn't the wake-up call. Not really. If anything, it made things worse. Because now I had this wound, this raw ache in my chest, and the only way I knew how to deal with it was to go right back to the same bars, the same streets, the same cycle that had chewed me up in the first place. I told myself I was just blowing off steam, that I'd learned my lesson, that this time would be different. It wasn't. I started going out every single night. I'd hit Lucky Star, then Windmill, then whatever go-go bar had a promotion. I'd buy drinks for strangers, tip dancers, hundreds of baht just to feel generous, bar fine girls whose names I'd forget by morning. I wasn't even enjoying it anymore. It was mechanical, compulsive. Wake up hungover, feel like garbage, swear I'd stay in that night, then by 6 p.m. I'd be restless, climbing the walls, and by 7 I'd be back on Walking Street with a beer in my hand. My expat crew was the same way. We enabled each other. Dave would text me at 5 in the afternoon asking if I was coming out, and even if I'd planned to stay home, I'd go. Because staying home meant being alone with my thoughts, and that was unbearable. Steve was always good for a laugh. Always had some ridiculous story about a girl who scammed him, or a bar that overcharged him. And we'd all shake our heads and buy another round, like we were living the exact same story on repeat. The money was hemorrhaging now. I wasn't even trying to hide it from myself anymore. I'd withdrawn another $1,000 from the ATM and it'd be gone in 4 days. Bar fines, bottles of whiskey I didn't need, lending money to girls who'd tell me sob stories I knew were probably lies but didn't have the energy to question. A girl named Ploy said her grandmother died and needed help with the funeral. I gave her 8,000 baht. 2 days later, I saw her partying at Insomnia with some other foreigner. I didn't even confront her. What was the point? I started keeping a mental tally of how much I'd burned through. $65,000 when I arrived. After 8 months, I was down to 38,000. I'd spent $27,000 in less than a year. The math was sickening. At this rate, I had maybe another year, maybe less, before I'd be completely broke. And then what? Fly back to Canada with my tail between my legs? Crawl back to the rigs? Admit to everyone who warned me that they were right? I couldn't sleep anymore. I'd lie awake at 3 in the morning, ceiling fans spinning above me, street noise filtering through the windows, and I'd feel this crushing weight on my chest. Panic, maybe. Regret, definitely. I'd scroll through my bank app, watching the numbers shrink, doing calculations in my head. If I cut back to 500 a week, if I stopped going out so much, if I moved somewhere cheaper. But I never actually did any of it. The next night, I'd be right back out there, throwing money at the void. The worst part was how normal it all felt. I'd see guys who'd been in Pattaya for 5 years, 10 years. Guys who were completely hollowed out, broke, still chasing the high of their first month in Thailand. They'd borrow money from newer expats, sell their laptops, their watches, whatever they had left. They'd talk about big plans, business ideas, online gigs that never materialized. And I'd look at them and think, that's not going to be me. But I was already halfway there. Then one afternoon, sitting in a bar at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, nursing a warm beer and watching highlights of a football match I didn't care about, something shifted. There was this old guy at the end of the bar, had to be at least 65, arguing with a bar girl about a bill. He was red-faced, sweating through his shirt, insisting he'd only had 3 drinks when the receipt clearly showed 6. She was patient with him, smiling, but I could see the contempt in her eyes. and I realized that's my future. That's where this road ends. Alone, broke, pathetic, arguing over 100 baht while the whole bar watches and pretends not to notice. I paid my tab, walked back to my condo, and just sat there. The silence was deafening. No music, no laughter, no distraction. Just me and the wreckage of the life I'd built. I looked around the room. It was a mess. Empty bottles, take-out containers, clothes I hadn't washed in a week. The place smelled stale, like cigarettes and regret. I didn't recognize myself anymore. The guy who'd arrived in Thailand a year ago, hopeful and excited, was gone. In his place was this hollow shell who threw money at strangers and called it friendship, who paid for affection and called it love. I opened my laptop and started researching. Not Pattaya, not Bangkok, not anywhere near the tourist trail. I searched for cheap places to live in Thailand, places foreigners didn't talk about, places where you could actually live on a normal budget. I found videos about Isaan, the northeast region, rural, agricultural, poor by Thai standards, not pretty in the postcard way. No beaches, no nightlife, no infrastructure designed to separate foreigners from their money. Just villages and rice fields and regular Thai people living regular lives. I found a listing on a Thai rental site. A small house outside Udon Thani, 2 bedrooms, basic furniture, 4,000 baht a month. That's about 150 Canadian dollars. I stared at the photos. Concrete floors, a squat toilet, a kitchen that was basically a hot plate and a sink. It looked like a massive step down from my modern Pattaya condo. But something about it felt honest, clean, real. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving. Not Dave, not Steve, none of the guys I'd been running with. I knew if I told them they'd try to talk me out of it, or worse, they'd ask to come with me and ruin whatever chance I had at actually changing. I just messaged the landlord, sent a deposit, and packed a single suitcase. Everything else, the extra clothes, the electronics, the stuff I'd accumulated, I left it. I walked out of that condo, left the keys with the building security, and got on a bus heading north. The bus ride took about 6 hours. I watched the landscape change through the window. The beaches and the tourist zones gave way to highways and strip malls, then eventually to farmland and small towns that didn't have a single English sign. The further I got from Pattaya, the lighter I felt, like I was shedding weight with every kilometre. By the time I arrived in Udon Thani, it was dark. I took a Songthaeyu, one of those shared pickup truck taxis, out to the village. The driver didn't speak English. I showed him the address on my phone, and he nodded, drove me down increasingly narrow roads until we were on dirt paths with no streetlights. He dropped me off in front of a small concrete house with a metal gate. It looked exactly like the photos, maybe a little smaller. I unlocked the gate, dragged my suitcase inside, and stood in the empty living room. No furniture except a plastic table and 2 chairs. No TV, no Wi-Fi. Just walls and space and quiet. I sat down on the floor and I didn't move for about an hour. I just sat there, listening to the sounds outside. Frogs, crickets, dogs barking in the distance. The air smelled like earth and charcoal smoke. It was so far removed from Walking Street that it felt like a different planet. The first week was brutal. I didn't know anyone. I didn't speak Thai beyond ordering food and saying thank you. The village kids would stare at me when I walked to the little shop to buy water and instant noodles. Old ladies would smile and say things I couldn't understand. I felt completely untethered, like I'd cut the rope, and now I was just floating in space with nothing to hold on to. I'd wake up at 6 a.m. because roosters are apparently the world's most reliable alarm clocks, and I'd lie there on the thin mattress wondering what the hell I'd done. But I didn't leave. I couldn't, because going back meant admitting failure, and staying in Pattaya meant financial and emotional suicide. So I stayed. I started establishing a routine. I'd wake up early, make instant coffee, sit on the porch and watch the village wake up. Farmers heading out to the rice paddies on their motorbikes. Kids in school uniforms walking in clusters. Life happening at a pace I'd forgotten existed. I bought a cheap motorbike from a guy in town, a beat-up Honda Wave that cost me 8,000 baht. I started exploring, riding out to neighbouring villages, stopping at roadside food stalls, trying to learn the names of dishes by pointing and smiling. I downloaded a Thai language app and spent an hour every morning practicing. The tones were impossible, the scripts looked like abstract art, but I kept at it, because I realised If I was going to actually live here, not just hide here, I needed to communicate. The first time I successfully ordered food in Thai without pointing, the vendor, an old woman selling som tam from a cart, smiled so big and said something that I'm pretty sure was praise. I felt like I'd won a medal. I started running again, something I used to do back in high school, back before the rigs, before the marriage, before everything got heavy. I'd run down the dirt roads in the early morning, past dogs that barked but didn't chase, past fields that stretched out forever, and I'd feel my lungs burn and my legs ache, and it felt good. It felt like I was rebuilding something from the foundation up. The loneliness was the hardest part. One won't pretend it wasn't. There were nights I'd sit on my porch with a beer, the only Western luxury I still allowed myself, and I'd scroll through my phone looking at photos from Pattaya. Pictures of me and the guys, arms around each other, drunk and smiling. Pictures of bars and beaches and girls whose faces I barely remembered. And I'd feel this pull, this voice saying, you could go back, just for a weekend, just to visit. But I knew better. I knew that one weekend would turn into 1 month, and 1 month would turn into falling right back into the hole I'd clawed my way out of. So instead, I'd put the phone down and just sit there. I'd listen to the sounds of the village settling in for the night, the hum of distant conversations, the clatter of dishes being washed, the buzz of insects. I'd let myself feel the loneliness instead of running from it. And slowly, over weeks and then months, it started to hurt less. I started talking to people in the village. My Thai was still rough, but I could manage basic conversations. The guy who owned the motorbike shop, a man named Somchai, started inviting me to sit and drink Thai whiskey with him and his friends in the evenings. They'd laugh at my accent, correct my grammar, teach me dirty words I definitely shouldn't use in polite company. They didn't want anything from me. They weren't trying to sell me anything or scam me. They were just guys being friendly to the weird foreigner who'd randomly shown up in their village. I met a retired teacher named Nong who spoke a little English. She started giving me informal lessons, just sitting at the coffee shop in town, going over vocabulary and grammar. She wouldn't take money for it. She said she enjoyed having someone to practice English with. We'd talk about everything. My life in Canada, her life teaching in rural schools, the differences between our cultures. She told me about her husband who passed away 5 years ago, how she still missed him every day but had learned to live with the absence. I told her about Jennifer, about Pattaya, about feeling like I'd lost myself. She listened without judgment and then said something I'll never forget. She said, "You cannot run away from yourself, but you can run toward a better version." I started volunteering at the local school, teaching basic English to kids a few hours a week. I wasn't a trained teacher, but I could help with pronunciation and conversation. The kids thought I was hilarious. They'd giggle at everything I said, ask me about Canada, about snow, about why I'd moved to their boring village. I'd tell them it wasn't boring, that it was peaceful, and they'd look at me like I was crazy. But those couple hours every week gave me purpose, made me feel like I was contributing something instead of just taking. My budget stabilized. Rent was $150 a month. Food was maybe another $100 if I ate local. Utilities, gas for the motorbike, phone bill, all of it together came to about $400 a month. I was living on less than I used to spend in a week in Pattaya. My savings stopped dropping. For the first time in over a year, I looked at my bank account and the number was the same as the month before. That small stability felt like a victory. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I'm completely healed, or that I've figured everything out. I haven't. There are still days I feel the pull of the old life. Days I wonder what I'm doing in a village where I'll always be an outsider, where I'll never fully belong. Days I think about how easy it would be to hop on a bus back to Pattaya, back to the noise and the lights and the illusion of mattering. But then I take a breath and I look around at the life I'm building. Small, quiet, unglamorous. But it's mine. It's real. And nobody's selling it to me. I think about the guys still down there, still burning through their savings, still chasing the high of their first month. I don't judge them. I was them. Maybe part of me still is. But I know now that Pattaya wasn't the problem. I was. I went there broken, looking for something outside myself to fix what was wrong inside. And all I found were people willing to profit from that brokenness. The bar girls weren't evil. They were just doing what they needed to survive. The expats weren't villains. They were just lost, like me. The whole ecosystem runs on loneliness and longing, and I was feeding it everything I had. Moving to rural Thailand didn't save me, but it gave me the space to start saving myself. The quiet forced me to sit with who I'd become and decide if that's who I wanted to be. And slowly, painfully, I started making different choices. Small ones at first. Going to bed sober, cooking my own food, learning a language, talking to people without expecting anything in return. Building a routine that didn't revolve around filling a void. I still don't know what the future looks like. Maybe I'll stay here for years. Maybe I'll move somewhere else eventually. Maybe I'll even go home to Canada one day, though that feels impossible right now. But for the first time since I left the rigs, I'm not running. I'm not hiding. I'm just here. In this small house in a village whose name most people couldn't pronounce, trying to figure out how to be a person again. And that's enough. So if you're reading this, if you're thinking about escaping to Thailand or anywhere else, ask yourself what you're running from, because I promise you, it'll follow you. The beaches won't fix your loneliness. The cheap beer won't heal your heartbreak. The attention won't make you whole. You have to do that work yourself, and you can do it anywhere. It just turns out, for me, it was easier to do it somewhere quiet, somewhere I couldn't hide behind the noise. That's the story of why I left Pattaya for rural Thailand. Not because Pattaya is evil, but because I needed to stop playing a character in someone else's game and start writing my own story. Even if that story is boring, even if nobody's impressed, it's mine. And after everything, that matters more than I ever thought it would. Marcus's words hang in the air, raw and unfiltered. His story isn't a redemption arc with a neat bow on top. It's messy, ongoing, real. He traded the neon glow of walking street for the quiet hum of rice paddies. And in doing so, he traded distraction for confrontation. With himself. With his choices. With the reality that no amount of external change can fix internal emptiness. This is the paradox so many men face when they move to places like Thailand searching for a fresh start. They think they're escaping their problems, but they're really just importing them to a location with cheaper rent and more distractions. The bar scene, the nightlife, the easy companionship, it all feels like freedom at first. But freedom without purpose is just drift. And drift, if you're not careful, becomes drowning. Marcus isn't special for recognizing this. Plenty of guys figure it out eventually. What makes his story worth telling is that he actually did something about it. He didn't just complain about Pattaya while staying there. He didn't blame the women or the culture or the city. He looked in the mirror and admitted the uncomfortable truth that he was the common denominator in all his failures. And then he made the hardest choice of all. He chose boredom over chaos, silence over noise, reality over fantasy. The guys still in Pattaya will read this and think he's weak, that he couldn't hack it, that he's missing out. And maybe they're right in their own way. Maybe for some people, the trade-off is worth it. The excitement, the adventure, the feeling of living on the edge, even if that edge leads nowhere good. But for Marcus, the cost had become too high. Not just financially, though that was part of it. The real cost was his sense of self. Every baht he spent trying to buy affection was a piece of his dignity he couldn't get back. Every lie he chose to believe was another compromise with reality. And eventually, there was nothing left to compromise. Rural Isaan won't work for everyone. It's hot, it's isolated, it's culturally distant from anything most Westerners understand. But it gave Marcus something Pattaya never could. Space. Space to think. Space to heal. Space to remember that his value as a person wasn't tied to how much money he spent or how many people pretended to care about him. In the village, nobody cares. And paradoxically, that indifference is more honest than all the manufactured attention he was paying for on Walking Street. If you're watching this and seeing yourself in Marcus's story, take it as the sign you probably need. You don't have to move to a rice village in the middle of nowhere. But you do have to stop lying to yourself. About why you're there. About what you're really getting out of it. About whether the life you're living is the life you actually want, or just a life that's easiest to settle for. Because time doesn't stop. Bank accounts don't refill themselves. And one day you'll wake up and realize you've spent years chasing something that was never real to begin with. Marcus is doing okay now. Not great, not transformed, just okay. And maybe that's the most honest ending there is. He's learning Thai, he's teaching kids, he's running in the mornings and cooking his own meals and slowly rebuilding a sense of normalcy. It's not exciting, It won't make for great social media posts. But it's sustainable. And after burning through nearly half his life savings in a year, sustainable is exactly what he needed. So here's the takeaway. Thailand isn't the villain. Pattaya isn't the villain. The bar girls aren't the villain. The villain, if there is one, is the lie we tell ourselves that changing our location will change who we are. It won't. Wherever you go, there you are. And if you don't like who that person is, no amount of cheap beer and easy company will fix it. You have to do the work. The boring, unglamorous, painful work of becoming someone you can actually stand to be alone with. Marcus did that work. He's still doing it. And if his story helps even one person avoid the same mistakes, then maybe all that money he burned wasn't completely wasted. Maybe it bought him the most expensive lesson of his life. That peace isn't found in the chaos. It's found in the quiet moments after the chaos ends, when you finally stop running and start building. Thanks for watching Bar Girl Baddies. If this story resonated with you, leave a comment, share your own experience, and subscribe for more real stories from the lives people don't usually talk about. Until next time.